Hello, you dirty potters. How are you today? Welcome to another episode of Glaze Review, where I take glazes off the shelf and I test them on multitudes of clays for you before you even get them in your hands. In today's episode, we are testing Micro Cerulean from the Mayco company. This glaze is made for stoneware clay bodies. We will be firing this at cone 6 oxidation, and this glaze is technically not food safe, which means a lot of my more functional stuff we will be putting a liner glaze in with it today as we test it. Now I know that lots of you brush your glazes on, but I usually pour my glazes. But I'm a man of the people, so I've decided to get a couple of test styles specifically for you brushers out there. We will be brushing on a redstone and a porcelain white clay body. These two will be our base tests. Both of our white and brown or redstone clay bodies will be brushed on and fired at cone 6 oxidation. Now for those of you who test the glazes how I usually test them at home because you really like the color of extra layers, we are going to be pouring on both this porcelain clay body here and this porcelain clay body here. These two are testers simply because they had a bad time in the kiln. And I really want to do one extra combo, but it's really difficult with these types of glazes simply because these are essentially crystal glazes if you think about it. They're micro crystal glazes, but I mean they still run like crystal glazes. So we're probably going to do one more test with some black glaze, but we're going to be brushing this one on as well. These two here are both of our white test style and our brown or redstone test style clay bodies. This is a porcelain clay body, although I do know this is a stoneware glaze, technically speaking. I've been testing it and it works just as good on porcelain, if not better, than it does on stoneware. So I feel fairly confident in glazing this with Micro Cerulean. This one here is our redstone or red clay body test style. I want to see how it works on this. This is most likely the last test I'll be doing on these micro crystal glazes from Mayco, because by my estimation, they do not like red or iron in the clay body whatsoever. The high majority of them usually don't end up making the crystals. Crystal glazes generally need a more pure clay body. Keep in mind, these two are both brushed on. You'll probably notice that I didn't put any glaze on the inside of this. Number one, it's because there's a crack down the middle and it goes all the way down to the bottom. And I don't want glaze to leak through and go onto my kiln shelves. So I'm just doing the outside to do a nice test style with the porcelain here. These two over here, however, are both poured on versions of Micro Cerulean from the Mayco line for stoneware. These are technically both, well, this one's porcelain and something else, but these are technically both porcelain as well. The main difference is this one I wanted to see how it would react on texture, and so this cup here has a lot of texture on it. I'm very excited to see what this does for texture. This, as well as this, are both poured on. So we get to see a good difference in between the brushed on and the poured on porcelain test styles. These two will definitely be competitors in that field. The final one here is a brushed on stoneware clay body with a liner glaze on the inside. This glaze is technically not food safe, which means you ought to put a liner glaze or a clear or food safe glaze on the inside while using the glaze on the outside where food would not touch it. And that's essentially what a liner glaze is. I kind of just wanted to see if there's an interaction in between the lip right here, because these glazes are relatively runny, and if you put a runny glaze, or usually some type of high gloss clear, along with another runny glaze, sometimes it runs right off the pot. So I put a tiny bit right there, if you could see it, just to see how far that dip runs. And this is the real experiment. This is really what I'm looking for right here. I wanted to do some combinations, but throughout testing these Mayco glazes, if I do any combinations, especially with high gloss glazes, they usually end up running. So a small suggestion, if you do combos, use it with a matte or a more stable glaze. With that being said, let's put them in the kiln. Okay, now that everything's out of the kiln, let's take a look. These two are the porcelain and redstone clay test styles. Let's take a look at the porcelain one first. Wow, that is so cool. That is actually amazing. And this is our brushed on test style. I put about 3 to 4 layers on this, and it didn't really run as much as you would think a crystal glaze would run, even a micro crystal glaze. And I'm sure I've said this in other reviews before, but I'm very surprised that this did not run as much as it did. You can kind of see that it congealed right here. It gathered up and it started to kind of think about running, and then it was like, nah, I'm not gonna run, I'm just kidding. Let's take a look at our redstone test style now. Unfortunately, a lot of the red clay bodies don't do very well with these crystal glazes in general, let alone these micro crystal glazes, but this one probably has the best result. You can see that there's a bit of blue on the bottom. It did its job a bit, and it did its job on the inside. So it definitely tried its best, if we're being honest here, but it still didn't get anywhere near the clarity that we usually get with a cleaner clay body. You can even see lots of little pits in the clay body, and this is pretty normal for something like this to be contaminated, right? And for this specifically, the contamination is just the iron in the clay body, which is what redstone clays are. They're really just clay with iron in them, so that they make them this kind of dark red, and some other stuff as well. But it doesn't really like it. It sort of treats it, especially for a crystal glaze, as a contaminant. Because when I shine the light on it, right, you can see those little pits right there. They're harder to see here, but you can really see them right here. Right? And so that's not something we really desire. So I'm going to call this a no-go for red clay, and that's kind of how it's been for the majority of these micro crystal glazes from Mayco. The high majority of them do not do well on red stone or red clay bodies, so I would steer clear of them and stick to some white stoneware or porcelain clay bodies. Now these two over here are poured on. This is our porcelain test style poured on with Micro Cerulean from the Mayco company. This one is a bit more interesting because I wanted to see how it worked on texture, and you can see the spots where it kind of gathered up and created a little lump of crystals. But moreover, the crystallization on this is gorgeous. It really is beautiful. I mean, look at that. I can buy this? I can just buy this? You can see the spots where it's a bit more thin. It starts to kind of make this greenish sheen here, but the spots where it's a bit thicker, maybe 3 to 4 layers thick, probably more like 4, you can see that it made this kind of crystallization of blue snowflakes down there, and it's beautiful. And this is pretty much the same result that we're getting on our other poured on test style, which is also a porcelain test style, but this one has a bit less glaze on it. Instead of this texture where it kind of gathers up and stays there to make a lot of crystals, you can see the crystals are far more spread out on this kind of cleaner clay body here. It's always so weird recording myself with these glazes because I can see myself like in the camera, and at times I have to remember to wear a dark shirt so that you can see the glaze. Because if I wear like a bright orange or a bright yellow shirt, you're gonna see that in the reflection, right? Because a lot of good glazes are really reflective, right? But this here has enough texture on it to where you can't really see me. But this is a very clean clay body, so you can definitely see me in this one. Our last test tile here was Micro Cerulean with a liner glaze on the inside. The liner glaze is serving me pretty well. This is my own clear recipe. I actually got it from Digital Fire, so it's not really mine, but I've been using it for a very long time for my porcelains. And the blue didn't really get affected by it that much. I made sure to overlap them just a little bit on the top, and the blue didn't seem to make any crystals on the overlap, but that also didn't stop the glaze itself from making these gorgeous crystals. I'm very happy to see the consistency and how much crystallization I'm getting from this glaze, especially considering that its main job is to make crystals. I will say the brushed on products seem to do a bit better than the poured on product. I would much rather have this consistently without any type of dripping, which I didn't get a lot of. This is brushed on and this is poured on, but I don't want to have to texturize all my cups in order to get this, because I like this more, but this to me is more consistent, you see, so I'd much rather take this brushed on version. If I were to suggest to anyone out there who's trying to get maximum crystallization with safety, I would put on about 3.5 or 4 layers of glaze, and if you're really etchy about it, go ahead and layer down. But none of my glazes ran. These are all testers, so of course they're failures to begin with. This didn't happen because of the glaze. But look, nothing ran here, nothing ran here, nothing ran here. Even the redstone clay body, nothing ran here, and nothing ran here. These are all fantastic. These are all extremely stable for crystal glazes, which if you're looking for a stable crystal glaze, you've definitely found one. Well, thank you, Dirty Potters, for joining me today for the glaze review of Micro Cerulean from the Mayco company. By the way, this video is sponsored by Mayco, so thank you to them, a big shout out. I'm going to post some links down below if you want to get your hands on these glazes. That way you can play with them yourself. So thank you again, Mayco, I really appreciate it. Remember to click all the like buttons so that way Mayco knows that you like these types of videos, and maybe they'll give us some more glazes to test out later. I'm definitely using this. I'm using this glaze.
Thank you for your patronage.
This is, I mean, it's like no joke. Look at this. You know, look at this.